Hey guys, so today is a video that I mentioned I had planned on doing for Christmas and then I didn't upload a Christmas video, sorry. But before we get to the video, I guess I'll give you guys a quick bump update. I feel like I look so much bigger in person than I do on here, but yeah, that's where I'm at. So yeah, pregnancy is going good. Really struggling with having to limit myself and how much I can do. Because as I mentioned before, I'm having some high blood pressure issues. Blood pressure is doing really good this week. But it's kind of like I just get up to go to the bathroom and it like skyrockets. So I'm struggling with not getting a ton of stuff done that I want to get done around the house. And, you know, being able to go out shopping or, you know, go out and have fun for a few hours or something like that. It's really rough because my feet swell up and all that fun stuff. So other than that, it's going well. Just tired a lot and easily physically worn out. Mentally, I'm ready to get so much stuff done. But physically, I have to like take it slow, so that's where I'm at. Today's video is one that is, I guess you could say, kind of close to my heart, because I would bet money. No, how do I say this? I could confidently say that this is the thing that got me into true crime. And it's kind of weird to say that because I was 8 at the time that this happened. But it struck that morbid curiosity chord in my brain at a young age. And ever since then, I've been kind of obsessed with true crime or, you know, anything along those lines. This is the story of the death of JonBenet Ramsey. So this took place Christmas of 1996. I'm gonna go briefly through a little bit of a timeline of what happened, read you the ransom note, or at least parts of it, and give you my opinion on what I think happened. So on December 25th of 1996, which was Christmas Day, John and Patsy Ramsey, who were the parents to JonBenet and Burke Ramsey, JonBenet was 6 years old and Burke was 9 at the time, say they last saw their daughter alive. It was at bedtime in their home, which is located in Boulder, Colorado, and they put her to bed. That was the last they saw her. They didn't hear anything happen until they found her missing the next morning. So the following morning, December 26th, Patsy Ramsey got up to make some coffee around 5:30 in the morning. And at the bottom of a staircase, which was like a back staircase in the house, they lived in a very large house. They were pretty well off. There was a 2.5-page note stating that JonBenet had been kidnapped and demanding $118,000 in cash for her return. Patsy was hysterical, got John's attention. They called the police, saying that the daughter was gone. On the police call, Patsy is reading parts of the ransom note that are very odd to me personally, because when you read the ransom note and then you do the research behind it, the parts that she's pointing out to me are really, I mean, and I could be wrong. It could be that she's just saying this is, you know, what it seems like they're saying or who it is or whatever, but she's reading the parts that really point to somebody else. And I've always found that kind of interesting. So the police arrive, but another weird thing that happens is that immediately after calling the police, the Ramseys start calling close friends and family members, obviously stating that they're concerned, JonBenet is missing, she's been kidnapped, you know, whatever. And they either ask or the family members and friends just volunteer to come over and show their support and help in any way that they can. This is where things really start to get completely screwed up in the case. So the police that arrived should have, without knowing what was going on, probably not let anyone else into the home. They probably should have been able to do a clear investigation, you know, see if anyone's broken in anywhere. It's a large house. It's going to take a while to look through everything. However, these people start coming in and doing anything they can to help, which family members and friends who aren't familiar with crime scene investigations, you know, are just coming in, cleaning house for them, doing whatever they can. So they're cleaning off surfaces that could be part of a crime scene, and nobody shuts this down. And this is all day. This is going on. So that's red flag number 1 of 10,000. The police come, and there is some muddled confusion over the searching of the home for JonBenet. Obviously, the police show up, and their first question is, have you searched the entire house? Again, it's a large house. And even if it wasn't, kids hide, things happen. It is obviously a huge red flag that there's a ransom note, but you never know what might have happened. Maybe there was a struggle. Maybe the kid didn't get out with the kidnapper. Maybe the kid is still in the house somewhere. So upon arrival, there's mixed information on what happened. Some people say that John Ramsey claimed they'd already searched the entire house. Some people say that they searched parts of the house. Some people say that the officers searched the whole house. But at some point, I want to say this is about an hour or two after everything went down, John and I believe it was either a friend of John's or another officer on the location decide to search the house again. And at this point, John finds JonBenet's body downstairs in an extra room that they used to hide Christmas presents in. Red flag number 2. And I don't personally blame John for his reaction. But again, when this happened, there doesn't seem to be any, we need to clear the house, this is a crime scene, everybody back up, quit touching things, whatever. But if John was involved, which is a popular opinion that John was involved in the death of his daughter, this would also muddy up any evidence. When John found the body of his daughter, probably thinking that she wasn't dead, he picked up her body and carried it upstairs into the living room. So again, losing a lot of evidence, losing exactly the way she was laying, losing any sort of evidence, DNA, crumb-wise, anything like that could have been around her, someone's hair or something like that, sort of all goes out the window at that point. So upon the police examination of JonBenet's body, it becomes clear that she was strangled with a garrote, and it appears that she has a skull fracture or a head injury of some sort. Now, one other thing that I would like to point out that will come up later is that during this entire searching of the home, John and Patsy claim that their son Burke has been asleep through this whole ordeal. They have not woken him up. One of the police officers that helps to search the house actually goes into Burke's room and sees he's still in bed. So at this point, how can they have thoroughly searched the house if Burke is still asleep, is my questioning on that. And they claim he never woke up through this whole ordeal. That will come into play later. So a few days later, on December 30th, police take blood and hair samples from John Ramsey and other members of the family to help sort of rule them out, maybe if there's any DNA collection. On January 1st of 1997, John and Patsy Ramsey grant an extensive interview with CNN, in which Patsy proclaims there is a killer on the loose. John Ramsey calls the idea that he or members of his family could have committed the crime nauseating beyond belief. On January 3rd, we're now 8 or 9 days out from the murder, investigators announce that the ransom note appears to be from a pad of paper located in the Ramsey home, which is red flag number 3 or 4. I don't even know where I'm at right now. If the authorities are correct, this means that the ransom note was written in the house during the kidnapping. The problem with this is the ransom note is 2.5 pages long. If you have broken into someone's home and are taking their child for ransom, you're not going to have much time. You don't know how the child's going to react. You don't know how loud they're going to be. You don't know if there's going to be a struggle. You don't know if one of the parents are going to be waking up to get a glass of water in the middle of the night. So why stop and write a 2.5 page ransom note to send your message? Especially when you read through the ransom note, it's a lot of fluff. So I'll go over the note now. The note begins, Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. I find this odd, right off the bat. Another red flag for me. Who in their right mind especially when you read the rest of the note and it doesn't really state what the foreign faction is standing for and why they're going for John particularly. Why would you give away any information about yourself? If you're going through a ransom, you're hoping to get out of this without anyone knowing who you are, anyone ever finding you. Why would you up front give that information out? It continues, we do respect your business, but not the country that it serves. So again, why John? Why this little girl? And why are you giving this information to them? At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. At this point, they tell John that he needs to withdraw $118,000 from his account, and they break apart how they want that money given to them in cash. The problem with this is another red flag. $118,000 happens to be almost the exact amount that John had just received as a Christmas bonus that year. That's not exactly information that's going to be public or that they're going to brag about to people. It's a very big Christmas bonus. Like, who else would know that amount and why that amount? They go on to give delivery instructions to John and state that any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. This is small, but it is another red flag to me. We go from speaking in a plural form, we are a group of individuals, to a singular form. Failure to follow my instructions. It says you will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Again, the beginning of the letter is saying that they respect John's business, but not the country that it serves. Yet these two men particularly do not like John, and not to provoke them. Which to me sounds like, don't do anything stupid, don't just research too hard into this, etc. It's another red flag for me. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. They claim if we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies, etc. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. It also says, you can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. That just sounds like you're trying to scare the police off the case. I mean, it's red flag after red flag. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. Now, this next line is a little interesting as well. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. A lot of people say that when Patsy, especially if she was irritated with John or she would talk down to John or whatever, she would speak that way. Don't try to grow a brain, John. Don't do this, John, or think about this, John. So a lot of people found that interesting as well. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. All of that sounds like a Southern woman talking to her husband. All of it does. It just does. The ransom note is closed saying victory, SBTC. Those are initials no one's ever figured out. No one knows what it stands for. Again, why? If you are trying to negotiate a ransom and get out of it scot-free, would you put initials in? Why would you do anything like that? These people are just so willing to give up so much information about themselves in exchange for money and hoping to get out of this without any punishment. I just don't fall for it. But again, that's my opinion. Now, on January 3rd as well, sources told the Denver Post that handwriting experts from the Colorado Police Bureau of Investigation determined that John Ramsey did not write the ransom note. However, their analysis is inconclusive as to whether or not Patsy did. In March of 1997, veteran homicide detective Lou Smith joins the Ramsey murder investigation. Now, Lou, up until the day he died, worked privately and pro bono for the Ramseys, continuing to try and solve the case. He was limited because he was no longer a detective on the case. He was a private citizen working on it. And he believes, up until he died in 2010, that the Ramseys were innocent of the crimes. On April 3rd of 1997, DNA testing began in Maryland, and this is actually a second round of testing done on the case. On April 18th, DA Hunter, for the first time, publicly identified John and Patsy as the focus of the investigation. On April 30th, police conducted their long-awaited interviews with John and Patsy about the day of the murders, 4 months after they happened. Patsy is interrogated for 6.5 hours, and her husband is interrogated for approximately 2. In May, the parents did an interview in which they claimed they did not kill their daughter, and the results of the DNA test come back, and they show, quote, no surprises in the report. I believe that to mean that there were no matches, nothing that would be of any major news. In January of 1998, John and Patsy refused to submit to another round of interviews unless they can review the evidence first, which the police obviously were not okay with. On January 29th, more than a year after their daughter was murdered, the Ramseys turned over to police the clothing that JonBenet was found in. In June of that year, John and Patsy are interrogated again by police separately and together. And for the first time, the prosecution conducts an extensive interview with their son Burke, who at this time was age 11. Now, my mention earlier of Burke being asleep during the morning of December 26th when JonBenet was found. In August of 1998, there is an enhanced version of Patsy's 911 call. And in this version, you can hear Burke's voice in the background, which would obviously contradict earlier statements that he had been asleep during the entire ordeal. In September, grand jurors are chosen to investigate whether or not John and Patsy are responsible for the death of their daughter. Lou Smith, who was a detective we spoke about earlier, is adamant that they did not do it and that this is a waste of time because there is still a killer out there. In October, the grand jury begins hearing evidence of the forensic evidence, that is, including analysis of the handwriting, DNA, and hair and fibers found at the scene. In 1999, during the spring, a 6-month extension of the grand jury's investigation is granted. And in May, Burke, who is now 12 years old, is secretly questioned by the grand jury. The next day, the Boulder authorities publicly announced that Burke is not a suspect but a witness. In October of 1999, DA Alex Hunter announces, after the grand jury has completed its work, that his team doesn't think it has sufficient evidence to warrant filing of charges. Now, in 2013, documents were released that show a grand jury indictment that accused John and Patsy Ramsey of 2 counts of child abuse resulting in death in connection with JonBenet's death. The charges allege that the parents permitted the girl to be placed in a dangerous environment that led to her death and accused them of helping her kill her. Now, because the DA Hunter refused to sign the documents, the Ramseys were never officially indicted or persecuted. Now we skip ahead a little bit to 2006. Patsy Ramsey died after battling ovarian cancer for more than a decade. And in August of 2006, you may remember hearing of John Mark Carr. He was a 41-year-old elementary school teacher who was arrested in Thailand after confessing to JonBenet's murder, saying that it was an accident that happened while he was trying to sexually assault her. Now, the case against Carr completely collapsed later in August when DNA tests prove that he was not a part of it. We'll get more into the DNA analysis of this later because that's a little sketchy. But the big thing that removed Carr from the case was that no one could even prove that he was in Colorado at the time, and I believe not even in the country at the time. He, from what I can tell, was just a pedophile that was obsessed with her and wanted to be famously connected to her. Now, in 2008, in July, due to new DNA evidence that points to an unknown male as JonBenet's killer, John and Patsy Ramsey were publicly exonerated of any connection to their daughter's death. Now, the final part of this very interesting case jumps to 2016, and this really solidified my belief in what happened. In 2016, in September of 2016, TV programs from A&E, Dr. Phil, Dateline NBC, and CBS News aired in advance of the 20th anniversary of JonBenet's death. Now, 2 of these were very telling, in my opinion. In one of the documentary series, they brought together a lot of different experts, people from the FBI, handwriting experts, DNA analysis experts, every kind of expert you could find, basically. Brought them all together to tear apart everything that happened, tear apart the ransom note, look at the DNA evidence, go through the different theories, go through Lou Smith's arguments, and see what seemed the most accurate to them. For instance, one of Lou Smith's arguments was that there was an intruder. Something pretty famous that people talk about is that there were no footprints in the snow outside of the house. Well, half the snow had melted by the time the police had gotten there. That doesn't really state anything. Lou Smith had stated that there was a window. When you're approaching the front door, there's a grate, and if you remove that grate, there's a window down to the basement, which is, I believe, the room next to where JonBenet was found. He claims that there is clearly a foot scuff on the wall and a suitcase propped up near that wall where that person could have climbed back out again. The problem with this that they go over in the series is that there are spider webs covering that window and they aren't disturbed at all. So that really seems like a stretch. Something else they talk about is how in the autopsy, pineapple was found in JonBenet's stomach, undigested pineapple. According to Patsy Ramsey and John Ramsey, she didn't have any snacks before bed. They got home, they went right to bed. It would have been digested. So that was kind of fishy as well. Well, I believe it was pineapples in milk was one of the kids' favorite snacks. And one of the many theories is that Patsy had her daughter up in the middle of the night, gave her a snack or something. One of the reasons maybe she was up was because she wet the bed. JonBenet was a bedwetter at the time. And a lot of people use that to point that maybe she was abused by her father, maybe she was abused by someone else, as bedwetting is a symptom of sexual abuse in young children. But that's never really been proven, and there weren't, don't believe, any signs of of sexual abuse on her. There was like some taser marks, obviously she was strangled, but there wasn't actually any signs of sexual abuse, if I'm remembering correctly. So that all sort of seemed like something that got blown up by the public. But again, she was up in the middle of the night, probably having a midnight snack. Patsy had her daughter in pageants, so a lot of people also thought she was this huge stage mom who had a temper and must have gotten mad at her daughter either for wetting the bed or something that she did while she was up eating these pineapples, struck her over the head, which caused the skull fracture, and then set it up to look like a murder. I believe that half of this is true, and I'll go into that in a second. So the pineapple thing is just weird that she's up in the middle of the night with pineapples. But the other thing, and this is the one that I really believe, is that her and her brother were up having a midnight snack. Her brother had a history of being a little rough with JonBenet. He had actually, I think, given her a black eye once with a golf club. They tussled, I'm sure, like most kids do, but Burke took it a little too far. I don't think he knew exactly what he was doing. Both the kids were up having a midnight snack. This is one of the theories. Maybe Burke was just having it, or maybe JonBenet had eaten all of hers and went to eat some of Burke's, and Burke grabbed the flashlight, which is exactly what fits the shape of the skull fracture, and struck his sister over the head, killing her. Not knowing what to do, not wanting her son to be taken away, as John Ramsey had already lost another daughter in a car accident, I believe, years prior. Patsy went into overprotective mode and did something she should not have done and covered up the death rather than just calling the police and telling them what happened. Set it up to make it look like her daughter was strangled, make it look like there was an intruder, wrote the ransom note, called the police, did everything in order to protect her one remaining child. A lot of people claim that there's no way a 9-year-old boy could have struck his sister hard enough to fracture her skull. They disprove that in this series that they did as well. They have a 9-year-old boy who would have been about the size of Burke at the time with a skull. I think it was like a cadaver skull and a flashlight, and let him go at it, and he easily crushed that thing. Kids don't know their own strength either at that age, especially. They grow up thinking they fight as hard as they can because adults are so much stronger than them, and then one day they develop a little bit of strength. My 5-year-old godson can hit pretty hard now. Like, he jokingly will go to hit me, and I'm like, good Lord, that hurt. Like, kids don't know their strength. They don't know how to hold it back because they don't realize how strong they are, especially when it comes to hurting a younger sibling. So I fully believe that that could have happened, and it was a complete accident. It was him just being pissed off at his sister and hitting her over the head. The other thing that solidified that for me and for a lot of people was the Dr. Phil interview. Hey guys, editing Haley from the future. I'm going to blame this on pregnancy brain, but I completely forgot to mention the DNA. The issue with the DNA in the JonBenet Ramsey case was covered in the series that I talk about, that I just spoke about. And what they found, excuse me, was that DNA is often transferred in factories when things are made. They went and bought a bunch of shirts, clothes, underwear, opened them up, found that there was already DNA on them. So the issue of ruling out suspects because they're not matching this DNA of some unknown male could very well just be because the person who handled it in the manufacturing plant left their DNA on the clothing. There is such a thing as touch DNA, which transfers DNA from one clothing item to the other, which would explain why DNA was found on her underwear as well as her pajama pants. So when people say, well, the father, the mother, everyone was ruled out because of DNA, it's not exactly as clear as that. So I just wanted to touch on that. So back to the video. Burke Ramsey did I want to say it was a 3-hour special or 3-episode special or something with Dr. Phil, talking for the first time about the death of his sister, what he went through with it, what he went through growing up with it, what he, thought happened, etc. And there's a lot of red flags in this thing. Most notably, he can't stop smiling through the whole thing. Now, you could, especially in, just snippets here and there, completely blame that on nerves. He's not someone who's been in the public eye. He's been someone who's been protected from the public eye. It's a nervous thing. However, it's also, what do they call it? An unnatural affect or reverse affect or something. Basically, you're having the wrong reaction to something. And when you're sitting in an interview for that long, you would think that he would get comfortable enough with it that he could stop the nervousness. But he really seems on guard the whole time. He really seems, it's awkward. It's really cringy. It's really painful to watch. And it really, my husband didn't know much about the case, and by the time he was done watching that interview, but by the time we were done watching the first half hour of the interview, he was convinced that Burke did it. The language that he chooses to speak with seems very careful, which could completely be lawyers advising him. But at the same time, it's like, if you're a completely innocent kid and you think your parents are innocent, why do you need this much advice? Why do you have to be that careful about it? I don't know. It's very odd. Personally, that's what I believe happened. I could be completely wrong. I wasn't there. I don't have all the evidence, but that is my assumption. That is the same thing that these experts came to sort of conclude without outright saying it, because I'm sure they didn't want to get sued. And they are being sued, or they were being sued by Burke because of it. But yeah, that is my belief of what happened to JonBenet Ramsey. It's heartbreaking. She was a beautiful little child. I think it was a tragic accident, and I think the mother covered it up to protect her only son. So that's all I have for you guys this week. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button below. If you have any suggestions for videos, true crime or otherwise, please leave those in the comments below. If you'd like to see more videos, please subscribe. I upload new videos every Wednesday. And other than that, I will see you guys next week.